Welcome back, dear listeners, to another episode of Susan Lopresti Wellness, Mind, Body, and Soul, the podcast where we explore the highs, the lows, and everything in between when it comes to a woman's life, her health, and all aspects of navigating the midlife landscape. I'm your host, Susan Lopresti, and today I have a special guest with me. I'm super excited to have him. His name is Justin Nault. And Justin helps people to lose weight by eating more and exercising less. So, who's intrigued by that? I know I was when I read that. As a nutritional therapist and the founder of Clovis, Justin has dedicated over a decade to transforming lives through holistic health practices. His mission is to challenge and also debunk mainstream diet culture, which often does more harm than good. And Justin's approach uniquely blends nutrition, psychology, and spirituality to create lasting transformation. Many of his clients have come to him feeling frustrated and defeated by their past attempts at weight loss and health improvement. Can anyone relate to that? They have tried countless diets from calorie counting to intense exercise regimens, and only to find themselves stuck in a cycle of yo yo dieting and also chronic fatigue. Many of his clients feel betrayed by mainstream health advice, and they're desperate for a solution that truly works. And that's why they turn to Justin for help. So, Justin, welcome to my podcast. I am so excited to have you here today.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. I want to start with your own personal experience because when we met the first time, you said that you were originally a musician and then you transitioned to a health coach. What prompted you to make that change?
Yeah, a number of things. I mean, I started playing music when I was 8, and then I was making money at it by the time I was 17, when I was still in high school. I was making really good money. I played some talent shows and kind of became like a small town celebrity, I guess. And then I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston. I got a degree in songwriting, moved down to Nashville. Next thing I knew, I had, my original music. I put out an album. My original music was in movies and TV shows. I was performing over 300 shows a year. By age 25, I had a TV show on ABC called The Big Time, a reality TV show. It was a global talent search that I ended up in the top 3 on this TV show filming out in Vegas. I launched a YouTube channel in the back of that and had a really successful music YouTube channel. But for me, it all came down to really body dysmorphia, and it's interesting now because I think that about 85% of my clients are women and about 85% of my followers are women, and I've been doing content for over 8 years now. And I think that's because I think there are now a lot of men coming to terms with this and really speaking out more about this, but there are a lot of men who had a lot of the body issues that women did as well. It just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't as talked about, and it presents itself a bit differently. So when I was a kid, I was born in 86. So I grew up on nothing but ultra processed foods, cinnamon toast crunch and Pop Tarts and stuff. But I was obsessed with Arnold Schwarzenegger. This was like action movie megastar time of like Arnold and Sylvester Stallone and Jean Claude Van Damme. And like I idolized these guys. But I went into high school, 5'2" and almost 200 pounds. Like I was a I was a large kid. I was at that, the politically incorrect term we used to use back then is I was a fat kid.
Right.
And I developed body dysmorphia very young. So from age 15, I started just lifting weights 2 hours a day, running on a treadmill an hour a day, just like trying to do the sort of masochistic punish my body to get in shape. And at that young age, when your cells are still very healthy and can regenerate themselves, it kind of worked. I lost a lot of weight. Muscle and Fitness magazine became my Bible. So I
Yeah.
was always obsessed with fitness, and that carried into my 20s. But then by that point, now I'm on stage and I'm literally living under spotlights and to a large degree being judged for my appearance. That's part of the music industry and part of being a performer, especially making music videos and such. And the body dysmorphia was getting worse and worse. I remember at one point I was 9% body fat. I was deadlifting over 400 pounds. I mean, I'm a purple belt in jujitsu. I was a boxer. I had done so many things in the physical fitness space, and no matter what, it was never enough. I was always chubby. It didn't matter how much I could see my abs. I thought I looked bad. Always pushing for more. When I deadlifted 425 pounds, I wanted to deadlift 500 pounds, and I just kept moving the goalpost. And that combined with my music career of like, getting off stage at 3 a.m., I'm going to bed at 6 o'clock in the morning. There's a lot of drinking in the music industry. I was just burning the candle at both ends and destroying my health. So in my mid to late 20s, I was like, there has to be something other than just punishing my body. And that was when I found the paleo diet. And it was the first time I ever took nutrition very seriously. And when I did my first paleo reset, I started dropping body fat like near effortlessly. And I was shocked. I was like, this is like a magic pill. Where has this been? How come no one has talked to me about like ultra processed foods versus an ancestral diet or whatever? So I became obsessed. And literally, in my spare time, I just became a certified nutritional therapist. I learned about epigenetics and I started healing myself with nutrition. And around the same time, my niece, Savannah, was born terminally disabled. So she was having over 300 seizures a day right out of the womb. So within 7 days of life, she was put in the pediatric ICU. She was given less than 3 years to live. And then within a few weeks, they had to install a G tube because she couldn't eat or drink. So G tubes, they drill a little hole in the belly, and then they have a tube and they feed the child through a tube. And that was my first introduction to the ketogenic diet. So in mainstream nutrition, the ketogenic diet is used to help suppress epileptic seizures
Mhm.
in children, toddlers, even teenagers. The Charlie Foundation does nothing but this for families. So my world was cracked open. I was like, okay, there's even more to nutrition than I thought. Like you're telling me you can tweak the macronutrients of this baby and you can prevent seizures, right? Now, unfortunately, it didn't work for Savannah because Savannah was not epileptic, but they did try. And to create a ketogenic diet in a baby who can't eat or drink, they use a formula called KetoCal. And this is in every pediatric ICU. Our tax dollars subsidize it to be in every hospital. It's created by Gerber, which is owned by Nestle, a big food company. And it's high fat, low carb, so it is technically keto. But this
Yeah.
is mainstream medicine we're talking about, where quality is not really thought about. And I just checked the ingredients, and it was certainly high fat, low carb, but the fat was all hydrogenated vegetable oils, soybean oil, these what we call seed oils today, artificial flavors and sweeteners. A lot of the vitamins they were using are synthetic vitamins. Like if anyone has ever researched using like methylated B vitamins rather than these synthetic versions that can actually clog up receptors and do more harm than good. So I just pointed this out to a very renowned neurologist, and I said, "Hey, look at these ingredients." He looks at the ingredients, he deadpan looks at me and says, "Huh, I never thought to check that." And I don't hold anything against this guy. I think he was trying to help. I think he was
Yes.
doing standard of care. I think it's a systemic problem the way that mainstream medicine works. But that was my sort of matrix red pill moment, and I was like, this is wrong. Nobody's coming to save us. Like I have to take this into my own hands. I ended up making a baby formula for Savannah out of paleo superfoods in my kitchen using food dehydrators and food processors, cleared it with the neurologist to feed it to her in her G tube.
Mhm.
And I ended up turning that into my first ever protein powder. I turned it into a superfood protein powder and started selling it online. And that's how I got into e-commerce. But then I just got on Facebook and I started ranting about what I was learning. I went down all the rabbit holes, all these books behind me. I was reading book after book and like medical nemesis and learning that, mainstream medicine is the third leading cause of death in America. And then I was learning about the corruption between big food and big pharma and that two-thirds of nutrition studies are funded by food companies and the other one-third are funded by pharmaceutical companies. And I went down all these rabbit holes and I just started sharing online on my own personal page. I went on Facebook Live and I did that every week for 115 weeks. And, here we are 8 years later with 650,000 followers. And that little private group I started now has almost 12,000 members in it. And thousands of people have had their lives transformed.
Wow. I want to ask you, you talked about body dysmorphia. Tell us what that's all about.
Yeah, body dysmorphia it can take on a lot of different manifestations, I would say, right? Like there's this sort of epidemic today of like men who are bodybuilding and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger and their muscles get bigger and bigger and they're almost, I mean, it's like quite freakish looking. It's a very unnatural thing. It requires a ton of calories, a ton of input. Like it's very metabolically expensive to look like The Rock or something like that.
Mhm.
And it's very rare that people can get there. And it's also very rare that people can get there without injections and steroids and peptides and all these very unnatural things to morph the body into that. And for those guys, there's actually a documentary called Orexia, which is basically saying guys that can just never be big enough. They look in the mirror and they still see a skinny little kid and they have to get bigger. The same way where there will be, I've worked with anorexic women, lots of women with bulimia and different eating disorders. And when they see themselves in the mirror, they may have gotten to a point where they're hospitalized and they're 80 pounds, and they look in the mirror and they see a fat person.
Yeah.
They see an overweight person. So this is body dysmorphia. It's your reality of what you see is actually morphed through the beliefs that you have and
Okay.
through childhood trauma, or like I got made fun of for being fat when I was younger, right? So like I remember when I was in my 20s, when I said I was 9% body fat, I remember being 9% body fat and thinking that I was chubby. And I would pinch my belly fat and be like, why can't I get rid of this fat? I still have all this fat. I got to get rid of this. Now, today, I'm healthier than I've ever been, and I'm probably 15% body fat. And I look back at those pictures and I'm like, I was absolutely shredded. I didn't have an ounce of fat on me, right? But I remember being in the headspace of believing that I had fat to lose. That's really what body dysmorphia is.
So it's all in your head, basically.
Yes.
You mentioned the paleo diet, so I wanted you to talk about the paleo diet, what
Sure.
it's all about. I know it's back from the ancient times when
Mhm.
hunter-gatherer days,
Yep.
but just talk about it, what it consists of, and how it helps.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I think the best thing we can do to study health and wellness is go back and look at anthropology and the data that we have, right? So it turns out skeletal structure, right? The paleo diet really comes from Weston A. Price, who was a dentist, and he traveled the world and he saw these indigenous tribes with no dental care, no modern medicine, and their teeth were perfect. Their wisdom teeth fit in their head. Our wisdom teeth used to fit in our head. Our skulls used to be larger.
wow.
And since the advent of basically domesticated grains and like monocrop agriculture, the human skeletal structure has been shrinking ever since we domesticated grains and made them a large part of our diet. So now all of a sudden I had 5 wisdom teeth taken out of my head when I was a kid. A lot of people get their wisdom teeth taken out. So Weston A. Price was studying this and he's like, what's going on here? And it turns out, much like modern medicine has been a miracle in some ways and has also been horrible in a lot of ways, domesticating grains and monocrop agriculture has been a miracle in some ways, right? When we were going through world wars and we were worried people were going to starve, monocrop agriculture was a lifesaver, but it doesn't mean it was healthy.
Hmm.
It kept people alive, but it doesn't mean it was healthy, right?
Right.
So I was introduced to this by a documentary film that I highly recommend everyone watch. It's called In Search of the Perfect Human Diet by CJ Hunt. CJ Hunt's an investigative journalist. He's now a dear friend of mine. I reached out to him after seeing the documentary and it changed my life. And it's really just going back and saying, what are foods that humans are designed to eat? What would be called a species appropriate diet? So that was where I first started learning about the ancestral diet. Like, if it exists in nature as a whole food, eat it. If it doesn't, don't eat it, right? It's like, and I use the analogy, you could go hiking through the forest every day for the next 100 years and you will never stumble upon a bagel tree, you know? And then I took it even further and I went back and I looked at the out of Africa theory, which basically states that humans didn't move away from equatorial locations until about maybe 60,000 years ago, probably more like 30,000 years ago. And in the grand scheme of a 3 million year history of Homo sapiens, it's really not a long time. And if you've ever spent any time around the equator, in El Salvador, Costa Rica, places like this, fruit grows year round. Fish and shellfish are abundant. There are ruminant land animals that can be hunted. All these things. It's really what I'm trying to do is create an eternal summer in people's metabolic systems of like, I'm going to take you back to what it was like when we were living in abundance of food available year round in places like Costa Rica. If you were ever to be stranded somewhere with no phone, no weapons, no nothing, and you just had to survive, you would want it to be near the equator. There would be food, coconuts and bananas and all these things that you could eat year round.
Right.
And that's really what I've done is I took the paleo diet and I added in what would be, around year round in a place like Costa Rica. And that's what I have people eat. So we're basically removing any and all ultra processed foods and switching to a whole food, nutrient dense diet. And that alone, before we even talk about macros or going for walks or getting sunshine or any of the other things I talk about, that alone will completely transform your health and wellness.
And we're talking animal protein as well in
Yes,
this
absolutely.
diet, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, okay, because there's this school of thought with animal protein not being good for your heart, and a lot of people are vegetarian, and I respect how they feel as far as that goes. But tell us about animal protein and how it really is necessary for us to be consuming in our bodies.
It's absolutely critical. And I mean, the thing to remember is everything that I'm teaching people is nutrient density. So the world really got duped. We got the wool pulled over our eyes when big food convinced us all to focus on calories. Once calories became the only thing that mattered, this is how you can sell like Special K cereal. And you're
Mhm.
like, this cereal will keep you skinny. It only has 70 calories per serving. What people missed in that is that the most calorically dense whole foods in nature are the most nutrient dense. They have a lot of calories because they are loaded with nutrients, right? You have fat, protein, carbohydrates, and then you have all your micronutrients, your fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. And you have your B vitamins, vitamin C, all these different things. And then you have all these different phytonutrients that are in plants and all these, there's just all these different nutrients. When you're making low calorie, ultra processed foods, they have basically zero nutrients in them,
Mhm.
which is again why you'll see things that are fortified with vitamins, like bread or cereal or even milk now, that's fortified with vitamins, synthetic vitamins they add in after the fact, because these foods are so nutrient poor. So if you only focus on eating low calorie, you are going to become malnourished. And where the big kind of myth that we were sold is that you get your micronutrients from vegetables, kale and spinach and all these things. These foods are incredibly nutrient poor. They have nearly no micronutrients in them, and they have so many anti-nutrients, what are known as plant toxins, that your body actually can't even digest most of the nutrients contained in them. So, animal proteins, on the other hand, are the most nutrient dense on planet Earth. They have the highest concentration of vitamins and minerals per gram, and they are incredibly easy for the body to digest. So people get hung up, right? I've talked to bodybuilders before where they talk to me about their protein intake, and it's news to them when I tell them that their animal protein contains a ton of vitamins and minerals. They're like, huh, really? I just thought I had to like hit my protein goal to have biceps, right? And I'm like, no, no, no. Animal proteins are the most nutrient dense thing on planet Earth. It's not even close. To take, 2 ounces of beef liver, which is like nature's perfect multivitamin, and try to get that same amount of nutrients from vegetables, you'd have to eat a cement truck full of vegetables. You literally couldn't do it. You would get sick. You'd arguably die from the plant toxins if you were trying to eat that much vegetables. It's crazy. So for some reason, animal proteins, again, the same way we look at calories and we don't think about nutrients, we tend to look at protein with animal products and we forget about micronutrients completely. But
Mhm.
really, the main reason they should be the center of your diet is because they're so nutrient dense.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about that with heart disease? What's the
Mm.
difference? Is it the type of meat that you're eating?
Well, no, not necessarily, right? A lot of this is just based on myth. It's based on myth and it's based on propaganda, right? So, like
Okay.
the food pyramid was propaganda. There was not a single doctor or nutritionist or dietitian in the room when the food pyramid was created. We had a surplus of grains from the world wars. We built these systems that just produced a lot of grains. So, we needed to sell these grains for GDP and a number of other reasons. So, they became the base of the food pyramid, not because they're healthy, but because we needed to sell them, right?
Gotcha.
And this is the thing. Now that you're doing podcasting, and if anyone who's started a business or learned about marketing funnels or anything like that, you start to realize that everything is a marketing funnel, right?
Yes.
When you look at the food pyramid, you're like, who's trying to sell me something here? It's important to analyze the incentive there. So the villainization of red meat as causing cancer and all these things always has a financial incentive behind it. So this is the tie between big food, big pharma, all these things. Once we started pushing a plant-based agenda and eat a high grain diet and eat plenty of plants and vegetables and don't eat animal products, chronic diseases actually went up. Chronic diseases have been going up for 70 plus years since the advent of seed oils and ultra processed foods and the switch to thinking about calories and all these different things. So 80% of the cholesterol in your body is created by your liver. You actually can't shift the amount of cholesterol in your body up or down by all that much by the foods that you're eating. About 20%, you can start to shift it. Now, when you have high cholesterol and your cholesterol is not going down, you usually have hypothyroid. Almost no doctor will tell you this because they don't know this. But I've tested this on myself. I've tested it on my dad because my I had a lot of great uncles who died in their 30s from heart disease. I was diagnosed familial hypercholesterolemia when I was 30 years old, and they put me on a statin drug. And I was like, this can't be. I'm 30. Like this can't be right. So I supplemented T3, which is a thyroid hormone,
Yes.
and dropped my cholesterol by like 200 points in a matter of weeks. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is a low energy problem. So the idea, like the lipid hypothesis of like it is lipids and fats and cholesterol that cause heart disease is completely wrong and has been debunked as completely wrong for 20 plus years now. Even the US government no longer has a restriction on dietary fat because the science is just so inaccurate what we were sold. And the way that these things work is you'll say like, oh, red meat causes cancer or red meat causes heart disease or whatever.
Mhm.
And then you actually look at those studies, and what they're usually counting as red meat consumption is fast food. If someone says, I eat a Big Mac with fries and a Coca-Cola 3 times a week, they're like, this person eats red meat 3 times per week and they got heart disease. Look at that. And they blame it on meat. The same thing happened a few years ago when a study came out that said if eating eggs is like smoking some number of cigarettes per day for heart disease or cancer or something like that.
Mhm.
Now, that study was hidden behind a paywall. So all you could see was the abstract. So you had to be willing to pay $40 like I did. I paid $40. I bought the entire thing. I read all the literature, the whole study, and I looked at all the mechanisms and how they were doing this thing. Some of the foods that counted as egg consumption were cake batter and donuts. So this is how modern science is skewed, and they twist things to push an agenda. And a lot of these studies are funded by food companies that are then trying to sell you ultra processed junk. So they say the red meat is bad for you. Don't eat red meat. Come over here and eat this special K cereal, or eat this bread that we have, or eat this low calorie snack, or whatever. But I think I said this to you when we first met. I've been saying in my podcasts and videos for years that if anybody can find me a single one that proves causation between red meat and any negative health outcome whatsoever. It can be anything. You can pick whatever you want. Bring me one study that shows causation, and I will Venmo you $10,000. It's never happened. It doesn't exist.
I saw that on LinkedIn when
Yeah.
I saw that. But as far as red meat, do you stick to just grass fed?
Well, yes and no. I tell people to stick to whatever works within their budget,
Oh,
right?
oh,
So if you're getting, let's say you're going to the store and you're getting like the cheapest, like it's usually like a plastic sleeve of like 2 pounds of ground beef or whatever, and that's
yes,
like a couple of bucks, right? Like if that's what your budget allows, buy that. It is exponentially better for you than Doritos or Pop Tarts or cereal or Oreo cookies or whatever. Like anytime you can buy species appropriate, nutrient dense whole foods, you should. It's better than anything else in the grocery store. And it doesn't matter if it's grass fed. And this is where I talked to you about. I was one of the funders. Clovis, my company, helped fund a documentary film called Sacred Cow. Sacred Cow is a film and a book. And I highly recommend you watch the film and read the book. And
okay,
they went deep and they tried to find the nutritional differences between grass fed beef and conventionally raised beef. And there are very, very, very few differences in the nutrient density. So this is the thing about eating ruminant animals, right? Like they eat things we can't process like grass. They have 4 different stomachs and they turn it into vitamins and minerals that are contained in the beef that we can then eat. I think where people get confused about bad meat versus good meat is more along the lines of like deli meat and like sausages and hot dogs and deli meat that has preservatives and things added
process,
to it.
yes,
Yeah. But if you're talking really about ground beef or steak or things like that, you're going to be fine with conventional or grass fed. The reason I love grass fed is because you're usually supporting regenerative agriculture, which is better for the environment, and those animals are humanely raised.
yes,
I
and
care that the animals are happy.
more sanitary as well. Am I
Yes,
correct on?
for
Yeah.
sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I thought conventionally raised
Mhm,
animals, they're in, from what I've read from time to time, in very small quarters.
mhm,
A lot of them are diseased, so they're
mhm,
being fed antibiotics to keep
mhm,
them healthy. Also, they're pumped up with hormones.
mhm,
And I've heard that the reason why they shoot them up with hormones is because they become more plump, and these animals are sold by weight and not quantity,
mhm.
so they're making more money from them. Is that true?
Yes and no. So
Okay.
all of it was true at one time.
Okay.
Now, conventionally, what are called CAFO operations or like factory farm, like CAFO is confined animal feeding operations,
Okay.
CAFO, or it's also called factory farming, these kinds of things, where they're using feed to fatten them up now for sure. They used to use hormones, antibiotics, and all these things. Now it has changed. The USDA doesn't allow the use of hormones or antibiotics, so they're not supposed to be doing that. But there are also all sorts of loopholes because if an animal gets some kind of infection, it's then considered inhumane to not give them antibiotics, right? So it's like you can't just give them antibiotics willy nilly. Then you have like dairy factory farming.
Yeah.
where their udders are being pumped at an unnatural rate. They're being fattened up for milk production. And then if the udders get infected, well, now there's a loophole. Well, they have infected udders. We can't be cruel. We got to pump them full of
Right.
hormones and antibiotics to keep the milk going and to keep their udders. So there's a lot of loopholes. But generally speaking, even these factory farm operations are not supposed to be using methods like that. But going back throughout all of history in farming, it was learned very early on that if you feed cattle, pigs, and cows polyunsaturated fats in the forms of grains that make seed oils like soybean oil and these kinds of things, you can actually fatten them very quickly on the same number of calories, which is also what seed oils do to humans. So there's
Yes.
a lot of different ways that you can get around fattening up these animals. You're right. They try to fatten them up as quickly as possible for slaughter.
Right. But if you're eating an animal that's being fed seed oils,
Mhm.
doesn't that transfer into us at
Yep,
some point?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So right now, right, I tell people to avoid seed oils at all costs.
Right.
And the reason for that is people think it's because the chemicals and the processing and they use hexane and all this. Yes. And right, the processing is full of nasty chemicals, but also it's just that they are made up of polyunsaturated fats, which is a type of fatty acid. There's polyunsaturated fats, monounsaturated fats, and saturated fats.
Hmm.
An easy way to think about this is like a stick of butter at room temperature is solid. Olive oil at room temperature is liquid, right? So this is where you're getting saturated versus unsaturated fats. Now, these polyunsaturated fats, most people are getting the highest amount of them from chicken, eggs, and poultry. So it's like we're saying avoid seed oils, which is great, but then they're still getting a bunch of polyunsaturated fats because they're eating eggs from chickens that are fed soy and corn to fatten them up. They're eating pork that's fed soy and corn to fatten them up. They're eating cows that are fed soy and corn to fatten them. So yes, like the fatty acid profile of those meats is dramatically different.
Right.
So for me, I get all of my eggs from a local regenerative farm where they do not use any soy and they do not use any corn. These are pasture. These animals are out on pasture and they're eating bugs and it's their natural diet. And then those are
Yes.
much more nutrient dense eggs that have more saturated fats than polyunsaturated fats.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I eat grass fed all the time because I
Amazing.
think about the unsanitary conditions and it
Yeah. Yeah.
turns me off.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize all that other information, which is very interesting. It really is. And I know it is more expensive, and a
Hmm.
lot of people struggle in the supermarket, but I feel like it's important to get USDA certified organic grass fed meat for me personally. That's what I choose.
Yeah. Completely.
Well, how do you feel as far as the amount of times a week is good, or when does it become too much to be eating? What's your recommendation on that?
Sure. Well, I think just briefly to touch on you're right. It's way more expensive to get
Yes.
regenerative grass-fed beef. Like, and it meats everything that I do comes from local farms. I'm lucky. I'm here in Austin. There's a lot of farms around. This is why I say the reason why I say conventional beef is okay to eat is because I don't want people to feel limited by their budget, where they say, well, I want to eat meat, but it has to be grass fed, and I can't afford grass fed, so I'm going to eat the breakfast cereal. You know,
Right.
I want people to still be choosing these nutrient dense animal products because even conventionally raised is exponentially better for your health than ultra
Okay.
processed junk food. And then
Okay.
when we get into the amount, I mean, I would say the minimum that I'd like to see people take in is 0.6 grams per pound of body weight, and then all the way up to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Now that would be per pound of ideal body weight, right? If somebody is 300 pounds, they're considered morbidly obese, clinically obese. They don't need to eat 300 grams of protein per
Right.
day. We need to find what is a healthy body weight for their age and height. Let's say it's 180 pounds, and they may want to eat between 140 and 180 grams of protein each day. So I
Right.
tend to do it based on the individual. There's no real like hard and
Okay.
fast rule on how much everybody should be eating. So like a 5'2" woman who weighs 100 pounds, she's not going to eat the same amount of protein that I do.
Right. Right. That makes sense. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, this is why every all my programs are what I call customized nutrition. So everyone who comes into one of my programs gets a fully customized program. No two programs are the same. The amount of food you're eating, the macronutrients, the way that we work all these things out, no two plans are the same because all humans are snowflakes. They have different activity levels, different genetics, different height, weight. And that's why
Right.
we have an extensive health assessment when you onboard, and then we build you a custom plan that's unique to you.
What's your feeling on dairy products?
Dairy is a very interesting rabbit hole to go down. So this is where I actually think it's far more important to focus on grass-fed, pasture-raised, regenerative farming, and all these things. And the reason I say that is because if you're taking on a lot of dairy products, you're going to be eating a lot of dietary fat. So just like humans, we actually store toxins in our fat cells. So one of the fastest ways to get toxins out of the bloodstream is to store them in fat, right? Because fat is hydrophobic. These lipids are hydrophobic. So you can pull these toxins out of the bloodstream and store them in fat cells. Animals do the same thing. So when you're talking about sick animals, right? That's one thing I will say. If you're eating a grass-fed ribeye, you
Yeah.
should eat up all that dietary fat. Eat the chunky fats, eat the chunky bits. It's delicious, right? Eat that. If you're eating a conventionally raised animal, probably cut the fat off and just stick with eating the protein because that fat is not going to be as healthy, right? So we always want to consider the what's happening within the fats of the animal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Did I
Okay.
answer your question or was there more to it? I'm
Yes.
sorry.
No, it did. It did. Your approach to losing weight, we
Mhm.
talked about from the psychology aspect and also spirituality and self-love. How does that play into losing weight?
Yeah, I think that yo-yo dieting, an obsession with calories, an obsession with biohacking, addiction to fitness. What is the next new trend I'm going to follow? What is the next new device I'm going to buy? A Aura ring, a Whoop watch, whatever, is an avoidance pattern. I think
Okay.
that people are using an obsession with the latest and greatest fads in health and wellness as an avoidance pattern for doing the deep work. And the deep work is the reason they got unhealthy to begin with. So I've never met an obese person who is just full of self love and just they love themselves deeply. They make good choices for themselves. They're not involved in toxic things, in alcohol, toxic relationships, working a job that they hate, all these things. I always teach my clients how you do something is how you do everything. So if somebody has let their health go to a large extent, it means by default, I can know without even talking to that person that other areas of their life are as toxic as the foods that they're eating.
Mhm.
Maybe they're working a job that's soul sucking. Maybe they have a partner who's emotionally abusive. Maybe something happened that separated them from their kids. They don't talk to their kids anymore and they've never really reconciled that thing, right? Maybe they are dealing with shame and guilt around their sexuality that they've never expressed out openly. Maybe they have been living in Detroit their whole life and they actually hate cold winters, but they've never had the courage to move somewhere where it's not cold in the winter, right? All of these different things. We have to help people understand that health and wellness, getting healthy never sucks. Getting healthy is never punishment. Getting healthy is never sacrifice and restriction, right? When you really look at the way that, especially in the West in America, the way that we look at getting healthy, it's no pain, no gain. It's like
Yes.
everything is hard. You must go to the
Yes.
gym and suffer and sacrifice. And then people have these repeating self sabotage patterns. We see it, everybody jokes around about New Year's resolutions. We're in February now, 2025. That means that virtually 100% of New Year's resolutions are over. People have
Out
quit
the window.
out the window, right? This is a red flag for low self worth and low self love because people are setting themselves up for failure so that they can fulfill their ego's story that nothing ever works for me. I've tried everything and nothing works. Getting healthy sucks. I have to eat 1,200 calories a day and I have to go to the gym and I'm miserable and I'd rather just live my life and be happy. So I'm going to go drink alcohol and go to happy hour and eat the chicken wings and the burger. It's this very binary either or.
Yes.
They're not making an identity shift. So the lens that I help people change is like if someone comes to me and they're drinking 10 Coca-Colas a day, and I say, "Hey, listen, you probably can't drink those 10 Coca-Colas a day and achieve optimal health." They can look at that one of two ways. One, oh, here's another nutritional therapist taking away my favorite food. I hate dieting. This sucks. Rah, 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 right? Or we can get them to love themselves so much where their perspective is now, I love myself so much, I would never knowingly put poison in my body. That's a completely different perspective and it changes
Yes.
everything.
Yes. Excellent. Any final thoughts, Justin, that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I would say if you have never intentionally learned how to love yourself, that's where you got to start. Everyone who comes to me, virtually everyone who comes to me is trying to lose weight. And the first thing I have them do is stand in a mirror, look themselves in the eyes, and say, I love you out loud 10 times. And at first they said, this feels weird. Why do you have me doing this? I thought I came here for weight loss. What are we doing? And I'm like, listen, we have to dig into the emotional and psychological. It is there's not a chance that just 90% of humans are just so lazy and so apathetic and so dumb that they're just big and fat, right? This is the mainstream will tell you that. These people are gluttonous. They have no willpower. They just can't. If they could just restrict their calories, they'd be fine. That's not true. So my opinion, which some people believe to be a controversial opinion, is I believe one of the number one reasons for the obesity epidemic is people have designed lives for themselves that they are not happy in. And it is until we address the fact that they've designed a life for themselves that they're not happy in,
Mm-hmm.
until we address that, they can never achieve optimal health and wellness. Because truly optimal health and wellness comes when you love yourself, you are surrounded by people who love you and support you, you are making money in a way that feels aligned for you, that's not soul sucking. You
Mm-hmm.
have the freedom and autonomy to have mostly do what you want with your schedule and these different things, right? A lot of people
Yeah.
are in these different prison cells in life.
Yes.
And until we can escape from that, it's going to be hard for optimal health and wellness. That's a lot of times when people ask me what I do, I say, I'm an architect of freedom.
Yeah. It's so true. It really is true. That's great. How can people find you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the easiest way is on all my social media. It's at Justin Nault Official. It's the same handle everywhere. And I always say this on podcasts, right? If you're listening to this and you're feeling something in your chest or you're feeling energy in your stomach and you're like, wait a minute, I've not looked at it this way. And like, this is really resonating with me and I'm feeling something here. Don't ignore that feeling. That's your intuition.
Yes.
And we've all been suppressing our intuition for far too long and waiting for some authority to tell us what to do. You are your own authority. So if this resonates with you, just go to Instagram. I recommend Instagram. Go to Justin Nault Official and just send me a message and say, I heard you on a podcast. Please send me your foods list or please send me your daily mirror work that I talked about, and I'll send you all this stuff for free.
Wow, thank you. That's
Yeah, anytime.
great. That's great.
Yeah.
Justin, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on. I will put all this information in the show notes so
Mhm.
my listeners can get all the information there as well.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you for coming on. The best of luck with your new daughter coming. When is
Oh,
she
thank you.
due?
July
You
19th.
July.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. Your life is going to change
I know. I can't
in
wait.
in the
So excited.
best way ever, believe me.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Justin. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate it.
Same here. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.